This is Peter Godinez with your Pivot Journey. Now, all my interviews are all special, and I know every host always says everybody they interview is special, but this particular one is very special to me because somebody who is my friend, my brother, and though he denies it, he's my hero, and that is Dana Nafziger. And many of the people who you're watching probably know who Dana is. That'll probably be our first audience. But if you don't know Dana, you're going to get to know him real well in this. And I have to start by saying we are two people, two friends, two brothers who really exist on the platform of grace. That being the significance of what Jesus did on the cross and what that means in our life. So that's pretty much the theme of what we're going to cover. So with that, Dana, why don't you just say hello real quickly and we'll get going with this journey, okay?
Yeah, Pete, it's a pleasure. We've been talking about this for quite some time, and we do talk at length over the past years for quite some time, and this has been a long time coming, so I look forward to it.
Dana, I know somewhat of your journey, and I kind of look at your life in regards to knowing you're from Chicago. You made a transition from Chicago to Cyprus, and then Cyprus to San Luis Obispo, and then San Luis Obispo to Tampa, and then back. So that's kind of like a little summary of your life. But what I'd like to start off, Dana, by asking you the question, and you can go back as far as you want, talk about who you want. But Dana, how did your journey begin, and where did it begin?
Well, I was again, all our journeys begin with our mother and father, and I was raised in an athletic family. My dad was a great athlete, um, athletic director, coach, um, always prepared, um, a good coach, a good teacher. He taught us well. And so I was raised in the Midwest, south of Chicago, about 45 miles. And definitely my upbringing was one of very similar to what I experienced in my athletic teams. My dad was a coach, so there's coaching styles. There's, I think, aggressive coaching styles, and then there's a more gentle coaching style. My dad was an encourager, held us accountable, but like I've told so many people in my upbringing, I don't remember ever a critical word out of my father's mouth towards me. Now, obviously, I wasn't a perfect kid. I don't think that kid's alive. I'm sure I made a lot of mistakes, but my father was just a class act. And so raised in the Chicago area, my parents were Protestant, we were Methodist, and raised in the church, raised in Sunday school. I still remember being in Sunday school and kindergarten. First grade, it was a blessed upbringing. It really was.
So Dana, you made the change. All of a sudden, you're in Chicago, and there was lots of connections of people who later on your future would basically you would connect with. But what made your parents move from the Chicago area to Cyprus, then which is in the Los Angeles area?
Yeah. So both my parents were teachers, and in the things in the Midwest started getting a little different in the 60s. Um, we had some riots in the Chicago area, and and in Illinois they had a teacher strike in 1966, and my father took a trip with a good friend of his to the Rose Bowl in, I believe, 1967. It was I know Wisconsin was playing in the Rose Bowl, so whatever year that was, and he really liked Southern California. Yeah, he came back. He was like, I don't really want to shovel that snow no more. And so he took a liking to it with what was going on with the teacher strike and some of the things that were going on in Chicago. He just decided to pack everything up and move to Anaheim area. So I went from Chicago Midwest to Anaheim, California in the 60s. This was 1968 that we finally moved. And, it proved to be a great move for our family and for me personally. I was an ice hockey player in Chicago, and I actually had a rink in my front yard. And I would play every day in the winter since I was 4. I probably was pretty sure I could play in the NHL. I loved hockey. But when we moved to Southern California, that kind of put a damper on that because there wasn't a lot of ice hockey in Southern Cal. There was no high school hockey. And that's when I switched over to football. So, I think my dad, he also had asthma and hay fever really bad. And when he came to California, that just pretty much went away. So that was pretty cool, radical move. All my family was in Illinois and Chicago, or excuse me, Illinois and Michigan. And it was kind of a hard move for everybody, but it was a good move.
I'm sure a lot of people who know you probably don't know what happened when you went to high school. And I want to call it Cypress High School, but I think it changed names or it was brand new when you first got there. But what was your high school experience in regards you remember about the athletics, obviously the academic, maybe some of the teachers and coaches that you met during that time frame? Because obviously they did a good job with you.
Well, yeah. So when we moved to California, I'd never played football before, and I was a baseball hockey guy. In fact, my little league all-star team went to the World Series. We went to Williamsport in 1966, and we actually took runner-up. We lost to a team from New Jersey that went into the final game. So even starting in Little League, I started at 12. I was used to great coaching, which was very similar to my father's type coaching. And but then when we moved to California, and I had to shift over to football, my dad actually talked me into trying out for football. I was a freshman at that time, and yeah, I'd never had a football uniform on. I was 15 at the time, and I was used to playing pickup sandlot football with my brother, who was 6 years older, and all his friends. And I had a lot of speed, so I could keep up with them, but they were like 5 years older. So all I remember is always getting hurt, going in crying. But being used to playing with bigger guys, when I finally did go out to football, I didn't even know how to put the uniform on. And when I did go out and had the uniform on the first practice, the first full contact, I can remember I was like the water boy. I mean, I couldn't feel anything. I was like running around hitting anything that moved. And always being dark complected, people always kind of wondered where I came from. And so they made up stories that I was raised by wolves in Aboriginal, over in Australia somewhere, or, something like that. So, it was kind of funny, the new kid on the block. But yeah, I just always had great experiences with teams. My whole upbringing is about the team, and to me, there are no individuals; it's just team, and that's how I was raised. And the teams I've been on they've always won, and it's about the team, it's about the family, it's about the church, it's about the neighborhood. It's not about individuals, and people come together and doing whatever it takes to accomplish a common goal, a common desire. And so all my movement was, to that level. And so I did go out for football, and that team ended up going to the championship game in Southern California. Again, at the time, I don't even know my dad knew, but Orange County football, CIF football was, along with the Chicago Catholic League and probably Texas football or Cincinnati, Ohio, it was the top football being played at the high school level in all the nation. So I ended up going to Western High School, not Cypress High School. Cypress High School wasn't even built then. I think Cypress High School was built in the 80s. But I went to Western High School, which is in Anaheim, And Western was in the Sunset League, which was the top league at the time, along with the Angeles League, which was St. Paul, Bishop Vermont. Western was in the Sunset League, which was Anaheim, Loera, Westminster, big time football. It was big, pretty big time. A lot of the guys that played at that level went on to major colleges. So, and it was close. Western was not the closest high school. Kennedy was closer, and Los Alamitos was closer. But those were all smaller scale. Those were 2A and 3A level. At that time, 4A level was the big leagues, and that's what I ended up being in. So a little bit of luck there, and just where we ended up moving, where my dad ended up buying a house. Because when we came to California, we didn't have a house. My dad was he was an adventurer. We sold everything and got a U-Haul, and my dad had a job, but that was about it. He didn't have a house. We were staying with friends that had a hotel right by Knott's Berry Farm. So, but that was my dad. He was an adventurer.
So all said and now you're a senior and you're a football player, and people are looking at you. So what happened that Cal Poly San Luis Obispo somehow got fortunately got their hands on you?
Um, again, I've always been I'm not a possibly what I would say goal orientated. I'm process orientated. In other words, I'm not focused on reaching, I'm in high school. I'm not focused on going to college. I'm focused on that day. I'm focused on that year. I'm focused on that team. I'm focused on process. And so as I started playing football, then probably my first break was as a sophomore. Again, this is the Sunset League. By the end of the season, I somehow get a starting job at outside linebacker, and we didn't have a lot of sophomores. Again, this was 3-year high school. We didn't have a lot of sophomores that were starting on the varsity. So I kind of got a break there. So I was able to play major schools like Anaheim High School, which was one of the top schools in the CIF at that time, SoCal. And so, my name kind of got around. And then, but we had a very average football team, and this would have been 1969. And then in 1970, they hired Coach Jim Everett, who was under Ernie Johnson at El Rancho High School, who were perennial winners for a CIF level at the top level. And when Coach Everett came in, he did change everything around, even the uniforms. We had more of a Dallas Cowboy, pretty flashy uniforms, and he switched it right away to Penn State, which is what El Rancho was, which is very simple, blue and white, not too much fanfare, nothing on the helmets except for a blue stripe. But he really instilled a winning atmosphere. The team thing, the same type thing. There was no real screaming or yelling. It was just a accountability to do the right thing for the team. And again, that was all my coaching through the years was very similar to what my dad instilled in me. Is it's not fear that's going to get you the win. It's the confidence that you have in trying to do your best and not worried about the outcome. And do it for the team, not so. Again, so it's not about you; it's about the team. So I was fortunate to start, as a sophomore, and I played football, baseball, basketball, and track. So I was a four sport guy. But football then tended to be the biggest one, and I think at that time in Southern California, that's your best shot as far as scholarship level is going to go. So in my senior year, then we ended up having a winning season. We were second in the Sunset League, and we we usually had been in the middle or down in the bottom side of the Sunset League. And my senior year, we beat Anaheim for the first time in many years, and we had a lot of games, and so we just had a winning season. We ended up in the final game against Bishop Amat in the Coliseum. So my last two games in high school had like twice as many fans as my first games at Cal Poly. I ended up going to Cal Poly. And I think we had 17,000 at the Big A against El Rancho, and we beat them. And then we lost to Bishop Amat in the final game, basically because of one guy, a guy named John Shiro, who I played against when I was at Tampa. He ended up going to the Eagles, and we played him in 1979 in the playoff game. But John kind of single-handedly beat us. I think he returned a punt for a touchdown, ran for 2 punt touchdowns, and threw for a touchdown. He was their quarterback and strong safety. So that's kind of a long history of the high school, the whole high school career. At that time, Southern California was really a neat place to be. I think all of LA in the 60s and early 70s it's a beautiful thing. There wasn't that much traffic. It was just a real good vibe throughout the whole city. LA County didn't seem much different than Orange County. It was just really a great move. I mean, we were 8 miles from Disneyland, but it was truly from going from Chicago area to SoCal, it was like going to Disneyland. It was a cool move. It really was.
What are your memories of the experience of the coaches and the players possibly that you connected with? So if you can give us a little taste of that, that would be really great.
Yeah, to me it was a similar culture. It was Coach Harper, Joe Harper was a gentleman's gentleman, held you accountable, but it was not fear-based. It was more they made a commitment to us. So because of that commitment that they made to us, they didn't bring in a lot of JC guys. They brought you in as a freshman, and they kind of made a commitment. And because of that commitment, it was really easy to make the sacrifices that we needed to make to be successful. Cal Poly had a lot of the guys from SoCal and NorCal that the Division I guys didn't want. At that time, it was Division I, Division II. Cal Poly was Division II. I was kind of one of those guys. Arizona State kind of made me an offer. Cal Berkeley made me an offer, but that was about it. And so I didn't have a lot of options. I didn't have a lot of opportunity. But the coaching system, the type of people, the players that they recruited were all family guys. They were team guys. They were functional guys. I have a word I say, it's kind of simple. When you see an organization or a team or a neighborhood, you can usually classify it in just 2 words. It's either functional or it's dysfunctional. And I think it's pretty obvious to most people when it's dysfunctional, even the dysfunctional people. But unfortunately, they just don't know how to get out of it. And the people that have that functional situation or culture, somebody figured out how to get out of the dysfunction. And I think there's a crown of glory for the people that do that. I call them the overcomers. And so I've always been fortunate just to be around systems where the overcomers, the people that maybe had a bad shot at life, they get a second chance. And that's what all my teams were. Even in high school, we had to run, at the end of practice, we had to run 10 sprints. I think there were 40-yard sprints. And we had one guy, remember his name, Paul Johnson, and he had asthma. And so by about the 8th sprint, we had to run him under a certain time. And if we didn't run him under a certain time, then we had to keep running him. Well, Paul, about the 8th sprint, he couldn't make it. So a bunch of us just, instead of keep running all the time, a bunch of us got around him and we picked him up, and we were able to make the time by carrying him, on our backs. And so we were able to make the time even carrying him. And that's to me what it's all about, is that You don't ever give up on your teammate. You don't ever give up on your family mate. You don't ever give up on your fellow employee. You just don't do it. It's maybe they don't deserve grace and mercy, but that's what they need. That's what we all need. So I've been just incredibly fortunate to be around systems like that all the way through my upbringing. The cultures were incredible. They were winning cultures because everybody was like-minded on what the goal was and what the approach was. And it starts with my father. It just starts with my brother and sister. We don't mess with each other. We don't have silent treatment. We don't have arguments. We don't have any of that stuff. My mom just passed away, and I was the surviving trustee for my parents' trust. And they got pretty big, and it takes some time. I had a lot of securities and real estate. And through an 8-month period, not one time did my brother or sister, both older than me, ever ask me, okay, what's going on here? What did you do with this? Or what did you do with that? Or what did you do with this? No, not one time did they ever question what I was doing. And those are great teams. So it made what is somewhat a tedious task, made it simple because you had total support. I mean, if people believe in you, it's kind of not hard to believe in yourself when people really believe in you. And that gets into the faith-based type side is God believes in us. He loves us. He's there for us. He promised to take care of us. So we just got to go on that. And I've always had those examples. Coach Harper was a Christian man, and a Bible thumper. Didn't talk much about it, but again, his actions and my father's actions showed me how much they love me. There's no question. There's never anything done to make me say, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. So that's what we try to do at our company, is create the same type of team atmosphere that I've been used to my whole life. It's fun to be successful.
No, that was a really good explanation. And, just mentioning Coach Harper, I feel privileged, and I think you were part of it, meaning, and I'm going to miss the name of a coach, but when you have a Joe Harper, you had a Von Hitchcock, and again, somebody you're familiar with, Coach Steve Miller. It's just how
Yeah.
fortunate we were to be a part of such a group of people. And I know you connected with Steve Simmons, who was there before Steve Miller. And I know I'm going to forget somebody, a baseball player, golf, but I'm just going to mention those three. And then, in fact, I find it interesting your connection with Coach Steve Miller and that he was from Chicago. He helped you with some running programs, and to this date, we're doing this interview in the year 2021. Still, he has an impact, and we have an impact on him. So I don't know if you'd like to just comment on some of the coaches, especially just your experience at Cal Poly with those coaches is something that I would hope you would kind of build on. So I agree with you with Coach Harper.
Yeah, I was fortunate. Again, you go through an athletic career, and like I said, the leadership style for me was similar through each level. And at Cal Poly, Joe Harper, and Bertie Har. Bertie Har was the baseball coach, and we spent a lot of time with the baseball players. And I was a surfer, and they had a couple of baseball surfers, so we got pretty close with the baseball guys. Probably more so than the basketball guys at the time, and the wrestlers. We spent a lot of time with the wrestlers. When Coach Miller came, we saw really kind of radical intensity within the track program. And I can remember when he came, and Coach Simmons and Steve, Coach Miller, there's just a lot of energy when they showed up on campus. And I did Coach Miller had this speed program, and I worked on it with Bob Trudeau, who was a football player, and Bob ended up going to Canada his first year. He didn't make it, and then he was with the Cardinals his second year. So we did a lot of training together. But I'm pretty sure in fact, I sent Steve a copy of the video of me running down Thomas Henderson. He had about 10 yards of me, and I clipped him at the end. I didn't tackle him, but I did catch him. And Thomas Henderson, I think, was a 10 flat 100 guy. He's one of the faster linebackers in the league. I would say that workout program that Steve had probably cut at least 2/10 off my 40. And more so, it was not the start. It was, after the first 15 yards, 20 yards. And I sent him that video. I don't think he had ever seen it. So I think he'll enjoy that. But yeah, it was Cal Poly was a great environment. We had the dorms, and the dorms, which are gone now. And I think that's a big problem with the Cal Poly athletic programs is, they don't seem to sometimes have the same camaraderie that we had, the closeness that we had. I mean, we were like brothers. We were on the same dorms. And I'll tell you, Pete, I lived in those dorms for 5 years. I tried 6 and 7, but they kicked me out. I wanted to stay as long as I could. But I don't ever remember an argument. I don't remember a conflict. I certainly don't ever remember a fight, and that's in 5 years. And these are all testosterone-laden guys. So Coach Harper knew, and I think Coach Har and Coach Miller, they all knew the type of families to recruit. People that understood what it means to be in a family, and how important family is, and how you need your family, and you need the support of your team. And because everybody's going to have some hard times, they're going to have some tough times. So that's one of the things that was pretty remarkable about my experience at Cal Poly, was how similar it was to what I was used to in high school and Little League and growing up. Joe Harper and my father probably would agree on about 90% of motivational techniques. They use the same motivational techniques. There's a myriad of motivational techniques. I mean, all we have to do is look at Wall Street and see some pretty brutal ones. The NFL has a much different motivational technique than the NCAA, than college football. But it makes sense because it's not a sport, it's a business. So through Little League to high school to college, same experience. NFL, not even close.
But you were an incredible senior. In fact, I hope I can find a picture of you. I'm going to flash it up on the screen. Very impressive, very intimidating. But now you had an interesting transition to the NFL, Tampa Bay, and it wasn't like one of those things where, wow, let's take them. It's kind of like, I remember you kind of got left behind a little bit, and then somebody goes, how did we miss this guy? You want to give us a little clarification of going from Cal Poly and then ending up at Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and again the famous John McKay, coach from USC. So I'll leave it at that. Go for it, Dana.
Yeah, I mean, growing up with my dad being a coach, we had a very kind of a strong sportsmanship type mentality. Families run kind and gentle,
right?
And through high school and everything, he had great success. I went to Cal Poly. I think it's because it was a lot of guys that were cast off. Division I didn't want us, so we were kind of like it's kind of a brutal crowd, to be honest with you. So when I came up, I was quickly indoctrinated into what they called intimidation football. In other words, on the field, it is uh, kind of a ruthless war, and you do anything you can to intimidate your opponent, which, I don't know whether playing by the rules is really that much of a question or desire. It just was a lot more aggressive. And so I got into that kind of mentality. And the one thing too that I'm off the field, out of competition, I've always really been drawn to gentle, more kind, gentle. I was a 60s in the 70s, more kind of like, not hippie, but kind of like, hey, everybody be nice to each other. I mean, come on, what's the big deal about that? That shouldn't be that hard. God is good, and He's blessed us all, and let's just try to be as good to each other as He is to us. Sets a good example. So I grew my hair really long, and I don't know why. I'm a surf cat, so probably that's part of the culture. The 60s, everybody had long hair, but I had longer hair than most, way down past shoulders. And I think what it was I didn't want to be stereotyped as a jock. I didn't want to be stereotyped as, kind of a thug, or, a tough guy, or because, that doesn't impress me in my own space. So, it was kind of like off the field, I went even more to an identity where I didn't want to be associated with the brutality of football. But then on the field, I was more brutal than I ever was with the people that trained me and coached me. So it was kind of a different deal, to where I became more of a pacifist off the field, but a radical aggression guy on the field. And as it turns out, that's what really helped me in the NFL getting attention. But in terms of being drafted as a high pick, or even a decent free agent deal, a 6'1", 215-pound tight end is not really what the NFL is looking for. Even at the time, most of your tight ends were 6'3", 6'4 plus, 240, 260, something like that. You didn't have a lot of 6'1". Well, I put on some pounds when I went there. But yeah, so excuse me. I didn't really have anything going probably through June. This is after I had 2 senior years. I blew out my knee in my first senior year, so I got another hardship case. So that probably helped me get a little more notoriety, because we had a really good senior season. I think we only lost 1 game my senior season, and I think that was to Boise State, who I think that year won the Division II, which is now the FCS level, football championship level. And so anyway, I didn't have any offers at the time, and a scout from Tampa came to town, and his name was Dick Boris, and Tampa had already had their lineup. They already had everybody they wanted to have in camp. This was June. They had already had 2 training camps, preseason training camps. And so Dick Boris was in town, and he was looking towards the next year. And Jimmy Childs, they were really interested in Jimmy Childs, who was a wideout that played, he had another year. He graduated in 1977. And Jimmy was, I think, 6'4", big wideout, smooth, really smooth, great hands, great patterns. So they were looking at him. And so I think it was Jim Sanderson, and John Crivello. Jim was the defensive back coach, and John was my receiver coach. They closed the door on Dick Boris and say, "You're not getting out of here until you look at this tight end." And Dick Boris says, "Well, we're not interested in tight ends. We drafted a kid in the 3rd round. We picked up Bobby Moore from Oakland, who was, I think, started with Oakland. And then we picked up Jack Novak from Cincinnati. We got plenty of tight ends." And so they said, "Well, you're going to look at this film?" He said, "No, I don't want to look at the film." And so I guess they locked the door on him. They said, "You're not leaving until you look at the film." Well, apparently he liked what he saw. They called me up. I went ran some sprints for him and some agility drills. And he said, okay, give me a number that I can call you. This was a Friday. He said, give me a number. I'm flying back tomorrow. I'll see Coach Monday morning. Give me a number so we can call you Monday morning, and we'll let you know what's going on. So I gave him the number, and sure enough, they called and said, yeah, Coach wants you to come into camp. So I was the last guy they brought into camp, and got to Tampa, and it was it was as radical experience from Little League in Chicago in my sports career, then going to Southern California football and other sports, and then going to Cal Poly, because I'd never even heard of Cal Poly from Chicago, and then going to the NFL. All of those situations were radically different cultures, definitely a step up in intensity. But as different as they were, to me, they all seemed the same. There didn't seem to be any difference. So that's why I ended up at Tampa, because I really had no other place to go. And I ended up at Cal Poly because I really had no other place to go. That was it.
No, I love that story, and I knew parts of it, and I knew it was kind of like I always think that in God's world, God uses second, third place people to accomplish his task, and so I remember uh, that story well. But now you're making the transition from the NFL to the business world. But let's talk about the transition from that and going into running a successful company called Aqua Systems.
Well, I think the biggest influence and the biggest impact I had was how radically different the NFL was in its motivational techniques. And I think it's just natural by the system. It's a business, it's not a sport. It's it's a different deal. And the difference between even my early years in the NFL and some of my um, you know alumni years, as I was there a couple of years, and it changed year by year. It changed, and um, again, going into the NFL as a free agent with basically you got nothing to lose and only everything to gain. I mean, my rookie year was as fun as it can be. I mean, I was just happy to be there. Probably after, I would say, a week, I didn't even care if I get cut because I knew I could play. I knew I could block people. I knew I had the strength, I had the speed, I had everything to play. So I had to answer my questions, and I'd have been okay getting cut. I think it would have been fine with me. Um, it was just really fun to compete at that level with the top guys, all from major colleges, most of them, and see that I could compete at that level. But there's something that happens in professional athletics. I think it happens in Hollywood. I think it happens in Washington D.C. Is it's just too big. It's too much. It makes too much out of people that God has gifted. They're just people. They're not. They're not gods. They're regular people. They have feelings. They hurt. They have joy. They have sadness. They have all these things. And when you get at that level, it's just so big. It's not even anything like what it is now. I mean, ESPN wasn't even around. I don't know how the guys deal with it now, but when you see people in Hollywood or even in Washington D.C. or professional athletes doing weird stuff, like wow, it's hard to understand the pressure that's up there unless you're up there. It sounds really cool, but what I found, if you don't have a decent amount of narcissistic tendencies, those types of industries can be pretty brutal. And I don't know. I think it's for other people to determine what level of narcissism we have. Not for me, but I don't think I have a lot. And the NFL kind of got got worse every year. It was less fun every year for me. So I can kind of remember after a couple of years at Cal Poly, I dreamed about what it'd be like to play at Ohio State or at Oklahoma or Nebraska in front of 100,000 people. I did. I go, wow, that would be, to me, the ultimate. And then getting that in Tampa, playing against Alan Page and Fran Tarkington and, guys that I watched as a kid was pretty cool. And, as I just got really blessed as a 6-string tight end when I got to camp. 3 weeks or 4 weeks later, I'm starting. It just doesn't happen that often. But the transition to NFL is not physically worth. It's just there's so much going on. It's too big. It's too much stuff. People make too big of a deal about you. You're just a person. You're just a regular person that God had gifted. And what I found is that the more gifts you have, God gave them to you. If you don't surrender those back to Him for His use, they can become curses. They can be a real weight on you. And that's what I kind of found the NFL was physically not anymore. I don't think taxing. We played a lot more games. I mean, we played 20 games as opposed to, I think, 11. So we played twice as many games. But it was just more the pressure to perform. You have to perform. You don't perform, you're out. And I think I was always raised to where you do your best. If you do your best, you'll be fine. And this was, no, if your best doesn't tackle Walter Payton 8 out of 10 times, then sorry. Well, a lot of people tackle Walter Payton 8 out of 10 times. Otherwise, he wouldn't have had as many yards as he did. So it was one of the things to me that I found challenging. At the spiritual level, it was beautiful. It's the greatest time of my life. So.
I love it. And what I want to do is I'd like to continue on with another interview and talking about more about the business aspect of it. But I really think the NFL, the Cal Poly, the high school is such an intriguing subject. But we are running out of time. But before I close this out, Dana, I think it's real important that we do a shout out to Brenda, your wife, I don't know how many years, and your kids and your grandchildren, because I know they'll watch this sooner or later. So you want to just give us a little piece on Brenda and your kid, your twin sons, and then your grandkids now.
Yeah, I was 3 years in the NFL single, and then I met Brenda back in San Luis Obispo. She was working, so we got married in 1979. So we're coming up on 42 years, I think. And yeah, she's not impressed with sports. So she was a perfect NFL wife because she didn't know. She could care less if I played in the NFL or, did gigs at a bar or whatever. So we've been married. I had twin boys, Chris and Jared. And but we were both older when we had kids. We were 35. We had traveled. We had done everything. We had so much fun raising those boys. I mean, I don't remember, we had plenty of money, and like I said, we'd done everything we wanted to do, and we wanted to raise kids, and they both came out really good. So my one son, Chris, I have a 6-year-old granddaughter, Kira, who is, I tell her, who's your most favorite person? Who's grandpa's most favorite person on earth? It's her. And then I have a grandson, and he's only second because he came second, but he's my second most favorite person on earth. And then Jared, my other son, just had little baby boy. And so my first grandson was Judah, and my second grandson is Noah. So, love those names. Love those names. Yeah, my boys, great boys. We had everything we've done together. One thing I could say is we had fun. We had a really good time, and we still do. So we've been very fortunate, you know. And I think it's the legacy of my dad, you know. I mean, when you're not criticized at every turn, it's pretty easy not to criticize. You know, you receive encouragement. It's easy to give encouragement when you receive it. It's not hard. I mean, why wouldn't you? That's what you do. But yeah, that's not hard. So I just wish my dad could have met his great grandkids, or great grandkids. Yeah.